What is a buyer representation agreement, or also called a buyer broker agreement? Should you sign one? What does it entail? Stay tuned. Hi, I'm Theresa Wellman with Homeowner Experience Real Estate. And today I'm going through the buyer broker or buyer representation agreement and talking through why you might consider signing one of these with an agent you choose. Now, if you've watched any of my previous videos about why you should have a buyer's agent, how much a buyer's agent costs, then you have a little knowledge on this topic. And the next step, if you're looking to work with a professional top agent, is likely to sign a buyer representation agreement. So I'm going to pull up what that agreement looks like and talk you through it. I'm also going to talk through a couple different points so that you feel informed and ready to move forward if this is the right thing for you. Okay. So first off, what is a buyer representation agreement? Basically, it's a legally binding agreement or contract between you and an agent that would represent you to buy a property. It legally defines what you as a buyer and them as an agent are going to do to work together to your common goal to find a property. It's going to protect you as a buyer to get reassurance that the broker or the agent is doing all of their duties to work for you. It's also going to provide a very knowledgeable agent on your side working in your best interest. And many of these agreements are exclusive agreements. Now, the code of ethics that agents agree to basically states that if a buyer is working with an agent, then another agent can't be soliciting their business. So once you commit to a buyer's agent, then you should be working exclusively with them. But it also provides you some protection from other agents who are maybe looking to solicit your business. So keep that in mind as well. Why would you consider signing an exclusive agreement with just one agent? The best explanation or difference I have heard is that it gives you a dedicated agent who's invested in your journey, who can continue to educate and work alongside you through the process. Now, I know a lot of people who've jumped around from one agent to another, and there's holes in the story, or they're not presenting the best offer, or they're not getting really good advice from the agent, and the agent is not really committed to their success. So if you're going to move forward and really be serious about home buying, it's great to have an agent committed to your success to help you do that completely. And from an agent's perspective, they are going to give much more effort if they know that you're committed to working with them, because eventually they will get paid by the seller when you close that transaction. So let's go ahead and look at the form, because it actually says you, the buyer, will be paying the agent. And I'm going to explain the situations about this so that you are knowledgeable going into it. Okay, so here is the standard California buyer's representation agreement. Now, this is bundled together with several different advisories and disclosures. So I'm going to quickly highlight those as well, and then we'll really get into the details of the buyer representation agreement. So here is the agency relationship, where it defines what a buyer's agent does and how they'll represent you. So they have a diligent exercise. They're to operate under diligent exercise of reasonable skill and care and performance of their duties, to be honest and fair dealings with good and in good faith, and to disclose all facts known to the agent materially affecting value or desirability of the property. So they're going to be your extra sleuth or agent to discover anything about the property, so you're fully knowledgeable going into the process. So you're going to acknowledge that disclosure. The next disclosure about fair housing and discrimination. We do not allow any sort of discrimination regarding purchasing properties in California, and this is the form that goes through the specifics and best practices for that. For example, there used to be a practice to write a buyer's letter. Unfortunately, many brokers advise against that because that can induce or encourage discrimination from one buyer to another, so we don't do that. That's a good practice listed on this form. Now, this third form is about representation of more than one buyer or seller. So going in, you know likely that your agent is working with more than one client. They may have sellers, they may have other buyers. Just know that going in, but also know that the agent, if you're committed to them, is going to be looking for your best option. Everybody's looking for something different and might have a different focus or a different budget. So depending on what your agent is focused on, just to know that they do have other clients, and they may represent a seller that could be a good match for you, and that could bring on dual agency. And what does that mean? So have that discussion with your agent. Okay, Now, wire fraud advisory. This is really important, and there's a lot of steps and processes I will advise you on through the home buying process to make sure you're avoiding any concerns with wire fraud. But this goes through the disclosures and basically says don't accept any electronic communication as the sole communication for any wiring information. You're always going to call and verify. And so what I typically do is give you the actual title company, person's contact and phone number so that you can verify anything that you've received in a secure email to make sure that you're wiring to the right location. All right, so here's the actual buyer representation and broker compensation agreement. So the essential pieces of this would be to have the names of you, the buyer, that likely will be preloaded. In this case, I have it signed with or added in with DocuSign, the date that it is implemented or signed, and then how long after that this form is in effect. The default that I use here at Homeowner Experience is 180 days or 6 months. Then it's going to talk about if you have any pre-existing relationships, maybe in different areas or different agent on a specific thing, you would list that here. And then in section 3, it's going to define what your property search is. So typically working with Homeowner Experience, we're going to have an exclusive agreement for any property that you are buying in Santa Clara County. You buy outside of Santa Clara County, then you don't have an obligation under this agreement. And there may be some more specifics in there that defines it. The next step is when the buyer agrees to pay the broker. So this is the part that I mentioned that is a little daunting for some clients. The majority of the cases, probably 99% of cases or more, where somebody else is going to be paying the buyer's broker on behalf. So you don't have to do that. You are waived of that obligation. And that is spelled out in this section here in item D. So it's 4D, accounting for payments to brokers by others. So if anyone other than broker compensate broker for services covered by this agreement, that amount shall be credited towards the buyer's obligation to pay compensation. Now, how do you know how much the buyer's broker will be compensated? One quick thing to do is if you go to Redfin, they're actually publishing anything that's on MLS, what is being offered by the seller or the seller's broker to the buyer's broker. It is clearly written out right here under buyer's agent commission. You see this one's 2.5%. And you note in this document we were reviewing that 2.5% is put in there. Again, that is payment to the buyer's broker. It does say buyer's agent commission on the Redfin, but it's actually to the broker. The broker takes their cut and then pays the agent, just to clarify. So it talks about the compensation and what's involved here. It's going to define what the buyer's agent must do and what you as the buyer must do. As the agent, basically they're going to help you find properties, help you study them, including inspections, visual walkthroughs, understanding maybe detail inspectors and recommending people that you might want to get to further inspect the property. They're going to help you prepare the offer, guide you through the entire process of getting everything lined up, and provide experienced eyes on all documents or on the property to advise you and give you a different level of insight that you may not get on your own because you just don't have a lot of experience. As a buyer, your obligation is going to consider all homes presented by the agent, to act in good faith, to qualify to purchase a home, to read all your documents, and to cooperate with the broker. So, it is your job to read through the disclosures and reports. Obviously, work with your agent on a team, and every agent is going to do that differently. I do explain to my clients how I represent that. 2 options: either we will have a Zoom or in-person meeting and go through all the reports and disclosures together prior to writing an offer, or we'll exchange emails with highlights so that I can point out things that maybe you didn't notice or think about. And those are the ways that you really want to leverage your agent to go through and be represented. So again, this is why you would sign a buyer representation agreement, so that you're getting that full service commitment and time commitment from your agent, because they know if you're committing to them, that they're committing to you to have a successful journey and make sure it's a great experience. So this defined payment goes into, basically different situations of how that can be stated. So as I showed you on Redfin, if a property is marketed on the MLS, there will be an offering of what is being offered to the buyer's broker. Another situation might be a new construction build. Builders do offer compensation for buyer's agents, there's just one rule that you need to be aware of to make sure you're complying with that. And that is the very first time that you go to new construction, you need to go with your agent and register with your agent so that your agent can be included in the deal and compensated through the process. That also will then enact item 4B here so that your agent is paid on your behalf. And the third situation is if the property is off market, there's typically a listing agreement in place if they've hired a listing broker to represent them, that you could, your buyer's agent is likely going to be offered compensation that way, even if it's not on market, because there's a listing agreement in place. And if there's not, in many cases, I have actually been able to negotiate compensation so that the seller is paying, for example, on a for sale by owner, the seller is paying for my services and to pull things together and to represent you. So those are all the things you need to be aware of so that hopefully item 4D is enacted and your obligation to pay the agent is paid by somebody else. Hey, if you have any questions about that, please do comment below. I'm sure there are some areas that maybe I missed or things that you haven't thought of that I haven't thought of that I can definitely address in the comments below. Now let's continue to go through this. Basically, I have all my clients initial here because that 4D, like we talked about, is very critical. So there's other pieces related to the timing of the compensation, that buyers will be paid or agents will be paid through escrow, that you need to disclose any pre-existing relationships, basically that we're pulling in that disclosure form at the very beginning. And this is where it goes through actual broker obligations and buyer obligations, right? So we have to use, as a broker, reasonable skill and diligence to provide guidance and to help the buyer acquire a property. And it goes through, we have to help with negotiations, go through reports and investigations, help schedule and attend meetings and appointments with professionals on behalf of the buyer. So be your full representation, fiduciary, and guide through the process. And the buyer obligations are written here to be in good faith, to have financial information ready, agree to read through all the documents, and to cooperate with the broker like I mentioned before. And if there's any disputes, you can go through mediation. Oh, and one thing I didn't point out is we talked about this 180 days here, but if you've signed an exclusive agreement right here, it says that, and here, that neither party shall have the right to cancel this agreement prior to expiration except by mutual agreement. So if both 4.2 or 4B2 are checked as well as 4C2, then that's the case. Basically, you can say, hey, you know what? I'm changing my mind. I'm changing my scope. I don't want to work with you. Then you can have a discussion with your broker. But again, it's set for a certain time as well. Hopefully that addresses all of your questions. If you're signing this buyer broker form with me, you'll also get a couple different advisories at the end, which are bundled on standard with the California Association of Realtors forms. So this is an advisory that goes into more details about what dual agency is and what the agent's obligation is, and then also buyer's investigation advisory that you should look into square footage and inspections and making sure you really thoroughly understand a property before pulling the trigger and writing an offer. The last one is a Privacy Act disclosure, and that's it. So hopefully that answers all your questions related to a buyer broker agreement and why you might want to sign one to protect you and to move forward with a dedicated guide to walk you through the entire process. Thanks for joining me.